The fifth age Jaques describes is the judge. In fair round belly with good cape unlined, with eyes severe and beard a formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances. The judge represents the age of mature adulthood, the years from around 45 to 55. During our youth, or young adulthood, as the soldier, we prove ourselves trying to fulfill our various promises. In our mature adulthood, we begin to judge how well we have spent our lives. If we have attended to the lessons life affords us, we earn the right to some authority. Shakespeare's judge is portrayed with eyes severe and with certain formality because he is expected to settle disputes and decide the fate of others. The judge understands human weakness, but he also understands the law and human responsibility. Holding all against a higher rule of law and order, the judge's eyes must seem severe, especially to those he must rule against. Those without authority come to the judge with capons, an old word for chickens, to pay him for his judgment. Indeed, the judge in Jaques' speech appears to have been rather well fed. His competence comes from his knowledge of wise saws or sayings, and from his understanding the current opinions and the popular stories of the day. Most of all, the judge has experienced life enough to understand conflicts in terms of both particular details and general principles. The judge knows that wanting something doesn't make it so. The judge rules on the merits of the case. The previous lessons have focused on improving abilities already present within us. In a sense, the lessons of the judge take us outside ourselves. The age of the judge teaches us to recognize authority greater than our own. In this unit, I will address some of the issues of authority as they relate to composition, especially to the composition of essays involving research. This age reminds us that what we say should stand careful scrutiny. We must consider matters of authority. What establishes our own authority, and how do we recognize authority in others? Practically, we know that authority requires a certain age, at least in terms of experience. We cannot be an authority in all matters. The younger we are in our experiences, the more we must turn to the age of the judge for understanding. Of course, just being old doesn't give anyone authority, but mature experience is a prerequisite. Mature people know their limitations. They recognize the relative importance of things. They are cautious when listening to the claims of others. Perhaps most of all, mature people evaluate their experiences honestly, always conscious of their own prejudices, of their own wishes and assumptions. For this course, the age of the judge introduces the idea of research. Eventually, nearly every writer must appeal to the authority of others. As writers, just as a judge in a courtroom, you must learn to gather and weigh evidence. You cannot be experts in all matters, but you can learn to gather and weigh evidence carefully. Practically, there are three sorts of research you are likely to encounter. You may need to provide a survey of information. This sort of research project would be illustrated by a review of important Supreme Court decisions on the death penalty. You might also be asked to offer an analysis of information. For example, you could be asked, how have recent Supreme Court opinions influenced legal interpretations of the Bill of Rights? Finally, you may be assigned to present an argument based on your research, developing or defending the constitutionality of a particular piece of legislation would require this sort of research. This sort of writing is important in both the business and academic worlds. Often you will need to gather and evaluate information. Documenting your sources is a way to demonstrate your objectivity and thoroughness in examining your subject. The age of the judge should remind you to combine the practical lessons of experience with the formal lessons of study. For this course, you will do a research paper that requires a survey of information and an analysis of a problem. This is your assignment. You are to analyze a specific social, economic, or political problem of a country you select from the list provided in the syllabus. In the essay, you must describe a specific problem of the country you have selected, give a brief history of that problem, and discuss what is likely to happen regarding the problem over the next few months or years. In this unit, I will describe a basic method for organizing, writing, and documenting a research paper, a method by which most research assignments can be efficiently completed. Beginning any paper that requires research may at times seem overwhelming. This is especially true when you are asked to examine a subject about which you know very little. Doing research, however, can be simplified somewhat if you follow a procedure. The procedure outlined in this unit will simplify your work and save you time. In fact, the method I describe will save you increasingly more time as the size of research projects and as the physical size of the library you use increases. Research is not limited to libraries, of course. As you begin gathering information for any assignment, you should be imaginative. Who might have information related to your subject? Consider public officials, other teachers, friends, relatives. You may use information gathered from personal interviews, public lectures, and even TV programs. The major advantage of the library is the vast amount of organized information it places before you. Once you know how to use the library effectively, you can find information on nearly any subject. The following steps provide you a method for organizing and completing your research project. The first 3 steps will help you get started, and I would recommend that the first thing you do is meet your librarian and get a tour of your library. There is more information in libraries than most students ever realize. Librarians at major libraries, at least, have usually earned advanced degrees. Libraries are sophisticated institutions, and the more aware you are of how to use your library, the easier your project will be. Do not hesitate to ask librarians for help. That's what they're there for. Be sure to learn how to use the online public access catalog if your library uses a computerized database. By now, most do. The computer catalog may be known by various names. For example, in the Johnson County, Kansas system, it's called the InfoCat, but different library systems use different names. You need to ask your librarian. In the second step, you will survey the information that you need for your project. In beginning any research paper, you need to explore the availability of information relevant to your subject. This requires a preliminary survey of your subject and a review of the sources of information available to you, given the limitations of time for doing the assignment. In college, general encyclopedias are used in gaining superficial familiarity with your topic. Encyclopedia articles summarize information which is generally considered common knowledge, information basic to understanding the subject. College instructors will expect you to use these sources to gain an overview of your subject, but to complete your essays or research projects, you will need to do much more specialized research than go to encyclopedias. Reading encyclopedia articles as you begin, however, is extremely useful. Such articles will introduce you to terminology, to names, and the other general information that you're likely to encounter in completing your research. Likewise, using the index to encyclopedias can help you discover the breadth of the subject. In fact, by reading through the index in an encyclopedia or in any text related to your subject, you may find a specific subtopic that will help you narrow the scope of your own research project. Remember, when beginning any research project, you cannot really master any topic in a few weeks. Your purpose in doing research is to gain a significant understanding of a subject, an understanding that goes beyond common knowledge and which enables you to provide your audience some fresh insight. You should at least gain sufficient expertise to participate intelligently in a discussion with others about the subject. Consider your research as a sort of conversation. When you are new to a conversation, you often feel a little confused. As you participate in the conversation, you will begin to understand what is commonly known and agreed upon and what is controversial. Becoming aware of the different points of view those involved in the conversation possess, you eventually begin to take sides and develop your own opinions. Probably the hardest part of research is getting started. Try to get involved with your subject. Visit the library, interview others, visit with other instructors who may be knowledgeable about your topic. After surveying the topic in general reference sources, you may wish to make a list of questions that you may wish to investigate. Noting the questions that occur as a result of your survey of the subject will help you focus your research and will help you give your work a direction at an earlier stage in the research process. Keep in mind the journalist questions, the 5 W's, the who, what, when, where, and why, and you can add a 6th question, how. These are questions which your research should answer. Remember, nothing will happen until you get started. Ask lots of questions and start looking for their answers. Once you have a sense of what you want to examine, prepare a working bibliography. This is a critical step, and many students skip it because they don't understand its value. What is a working bibliography? A working bibliography is simply a list of sources you may want to consult as you research your topic. Typically, students consult the Reader's Guide to Periodicals, or in most libraries today, the online public access catalog, or some other computerized database. After finding a few possible sources, they go in search of them. Unfortunately, the desired books or articles may turn out to be unavailable. If they are unavailable, they may turn out to provide some usable information. However, even if the information sought for is found and is usable, a research paper will require more than a few sources. Additional information will need to be found. Students who look up only a few sources and then go search for them will find themselves frequently returning to the reference section of the library to look up additional sources. In a small library, this won't mean much wasted time unless the reference book or the computer terminal needed is being used by another student. However, in a large library, if you follow this piecemeal approach, you may find yourself constantly waiting on slow elevators, spending hours backtracking from the reference room in the library on the first floor to the desired books or periodicals which are located on another floor far away. The most efficient way to use a library is to prepare a working bibliography. When you begin your project, go to the reference section of the library and prepare a list of possible sources. Try to find at least 20. If you can find more easily, do so. If you can only find 2 or 3 sources, go to the librarian for help. You may need to consider a different subject or a different approach to the subject. The only real limits you will encounter in this essay are those placed on you by the availability of information. I would recommend you're preparing your working bibliography on 3x5-inch note cards, the small ones, and prepare a note card for each source you discover that might be useful. Of course, since many libraries allow you to print bibliographic information directly from the catalog, that may be faster for you. I think bibliography cards allow you to organize your information more effectively than having all your sources listed on a few pages of paper. It will be of help to you later and your instructor to determine whether you will use bibliography cards. If you do, the note cards should contain the information illustrated on these bibliography cards. First of all, you need to list, if you're doing a journal, the author's name. You need the title of the article that you're going to consult, and you'll also want to make sure that you have the journal itself listed. The same thing would happen if you were looking at a periodical. You would first of all write down the author's name, the title of the article, the title of the journal the article occurs in, and of course the date. If you are preparing a bibliography card for a book, again, you first of all will need the call letters, the reference that reference the book in the library. The author's names will be listed, and of course the title of the book itself. And you will need to know the location of the publisher and the publisher itself and the date of publication when you prepare your Works Cited page, so you need to record that information also. The handbook assigned for this course will show you how to document the various sources you're likely to encounter. Be sure to review that information, the information provided in the handbook for documenting sources, before you begin. Organize your bibliography cards according to the call numbers of the books so that you can avoid needless wandering around in the library. Organize your cards for periodicals according to those which seem most promising in terms of offering usable and current information. After assembling your working bibliography, you are ready to start gathering information. Begin reading and taking notes. At first, you may not know exactly what to read or what notes to write down. Don't worry. Everything you read will add to your knowledge. When you begin reading, you may wish to examine the table of contents and the index of each book. This will help you see how others have examined the subject and may help you narrow your topic and focus your research. When taking notes, I encourage the use of note cards. There are several types of note cards you may need to prepare. In preparing the cards, you will either summarize, paraphrase, or quote the material you are reading. Most notes should be in your own words, in the form of summaries or paraphrases. Students frequently dislike the idea of note cards. If used correctly, however, note cards can simplify the process of writing the research paper. The following suggestions will make note cards work more effectively. First of all, write on the 5 by 7 inch size note cards. The larger size will give you space to write legibly and will help to keep your notes, note cards neat so that you can separate them from your bibliography cards. Here's a sample note card. The most important point about note cards is to write only one note on each card. If you write more than that, you might as well write your notes on a tablet of paper. First, write the author's name, next the page number, and finally the single idea you want to remember. You will need the bibliographic information to document your notes in your essay. Recording the source and the page number is critical. As you gather more notes, organizing your notes under subject headings will also help. By recording only one idea on each note card, you will break down the articles you read into particular ideas and bits of information which you can later recombine to serve your own thesis. Oftentimes, research papers become a collection of summaries based on photocopied articles. The student summarizes photocopied article number 1, then follows a summary of article number 2, then article 3, and so on. Such an essay usually lacks any real thesis other than an implied, "My research paper will summarize 4 articles." Note cards can be useful in helping you to break down the articles you read into usable information which you organize using your own subject headings. As a rule of thumb, write your notes in your own words. If you're going to copy everything directly from the source, copy machines are faster. Writing notes in your own words will serve several purposes. First, expressing the ideas in your own words will force you to try and understand what it is you are reading. It is easy to copy pages of material and not learn a thing. Second, by recording your notes in your own words, your note-taking becomes a sort of pre-writing or early draft of your paper. Even though you don't know yet how the notes will be used, you have begun writing out important ideas which will be in the essay. And third, and a rather silly benefit, but writing in your own words will force you to be involved in the note-taking. It'll help you stay awake. As a rule, the only notes you ought to copy verbatim are short, very usable quotes. Most information can easily be summarized or paraphrased. Remember, when you summarize an idea, you express it usually in condensed form, emphasizing what you consider to be the major point of the passage. When you paraphrase a passage, you express pretty much the full content of the original, but in your own words. Note cards are also useful in monitoring your research and pre-writing. If a personal idea or question comes to you while you're reading, write it down on a note card also. Identify such cards as representing yourself. While you are taking notes, you might think of a way to introduce or conclude the essay, or you might think of a point you want to be sure to include. Recording that information immediately, instead of waiting till you are actually writing the essay, will help you preserve valuable insights. And again, you see note cards providing a sort of early draft of the essay. As you begin a clearer sense of the various points you will discuss in the essay, you can label your note cards with appropriate subject headings. You may need to formulate a tentative thesis and outline before you can determine the subject headings for your note cards, but eventually, labeling your note cards by the subjects they relate to will enable you to keep your notes organized. After gathering information, you are ready to begin drafting the essay. Periodically, write to the question, "What have I learned so far from my reading?" Or, "What could I explain to my friends who likely don't really understand this topic?" Doing this can help you discover the thesis of your essay. Prepare a tentative thesis and an outline. Remember, the thesis needs to be a complete declarative sentence. A clear thesis does not, or does more, I should say, than identify the general subject of the paper. It identifies the main ideas the paper will support or clarify. The sample research paper in this unit discusses the violence occurring in Somalia during the first half of 1992. A thesis for that paper could be, "The destruction of the traditional clan system in Somalia has resulted in a violent struggle for power that may require international forces to provide a solution." This thesis indicates the paper will examine the value of the traditional clan system in Somalia and explain how the clan system was destroyed. The paper would also need to describe the violent struggle taking place in Somalia and tell why international forces may be needed. Arrange your cards to support the thesis and the outline. At this point, the purpose of note cards should become clear. Find a large table and spread your note cards before you to support your thesis. You should be able to see clearly where you have enough material to support your thesis and where you may need to do further research. Moreover, as you arrange your note cards to support or develop your thesis, you will almost automatically begin to synthesize your research. Probably the most common criticism of college research essays is that they present summaries of articles, but show little real understanding on the part of the student. As you organize your note cards, you will be proving to yourself as well as to your audience that you have formulated an educated opinion about your subject. In the next step, after looking over your tentative outline and your note cards, you may need to do further research. The important thing is to pace yourself, so you will have time for this if it is needed. Finally, compose a rough draft of the essay. As you write a rough draft, indicate your sources as you write the draft. Basically, this means as you write your draft, whenever you look at a note card, put the author's name on the page and the page number of the source and record that in the draft. There are many ways to document an essay. The form used in this presentation is that of the Modern Language Association, usually referred to as the MLA style. However, there are other equally valid ways of documenting your sources. The appropriate one depends on your audience. In college, it depends on your instructor. When doing any sort of writing that requires documentation, be sure you know the expected form of documentation before you prepare your final draft. The best practice is to prepare your final draft with the documentation guide open and in front of you. In this course, that information is in your handbook. After critiquing your rough draft and revising your essay, prepare your final draft. We will examine more fully the requirements for documenting the essay in the next lesson. Organize your bibliography cards alphabetically and prepare a works cited page. Be sure you only list the works or the sources actually cited in the text of the essay. And for the 12th step, edit your paper. Again, check your documentation and the format of your paper against the assigned style sheet. Following these steps will help you write a competent research paper in a timely fashion. Of course, writing never follows a neat 12-step guide, and many good writers don't follow each of these steps exactly as I have outlined them. Nonetheless, with practice, I believe this process will help ensure a more successful paper, while at the same time saving you time. Outlining a library research procedure, as I have just done, seems rather mechanical, perhaps a bit dull. Interestingly, people often feel that way about the legal procedures in a court of law until they realize every courtroom reflects the personality of the presiding judge. The judge illustrates for us a new voice, a voice based on the authority of experience and study. In writing research papers, you must gather your information. You must understand the facts of the case, the data. You must review the subject in a dispassionate manner, and after gathering your information, you must interpret it as best you can, evaluating at every stage the credibility of your sources. While you formulate your thesis and organize your research to support it, your personality is far from being excluded. Actually, since you must interpret and organize your research, your voice is as evident in this sort of writing as in any other. However, rather than using the voice of a warring youth or of an impassioned adolescent, research should be presented in the voice of mature adulthood, in the firm voice of reason.